Welcome everyone to Huddle Chats. These are 45-minute conversations with industry experts about key healthcare trends, ranging from digital health to business trends to policy trends. I'm Jared Dashevsky. I'm founder of Healthcare Huddle, a weekly healthcare newsletter breaking down key problems in the healthcare space from like the physician, business, and system perspective. I've been writing since 2020, so coming up on 4 years, and now write for an audience of more than like 30,000 health professionals. When I'm not doing Healthcare Huddle, I'm a resident in New York City, which has also been a very fun experience, writing about healthcare and being at the front lines. In today's Huddle Chats, we'll be discussing the blueprint for scoring digital health innovations. I have Lindsay Shapiro here with me again. She was kind enough to come back after doing another virtual event on the Peterson Health Technology Institute back in August. In August, we kind of introed the Peterson Health Technology Institute. And since then, the Institute has made tremendous progress. And now I want to get into the what they're doing and how they're doing it. So Lindsay, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jared.
No, you go. Okay, so for a couple housekeeping, everyone will be muted. These are recorded. Please, use emoji reactions, Q&As. There will be a link posted in the chat, but there's only like 20 people here, so feel free to post in the chat, and hopefully we can make this more interactive, and we'll have time at the end for Q&A. And most importantly, stay curious. All right, the way I like to do things is, or the way I would like to do things is to start it off with recapping the digital health ecosystem and introing again who the Peterson Health Technology Institute is. Then we'll dive into the framework that was just released in September, and then get into some frequently asked questions that you'll likely have. Okay, so getting into the current digital health ecosystem, if you're familiar with Rock Health, they released this quarterly digital health funding report. It's amazing. They just released the third quarter report for digital health funding earlier this month. And the pattern we've seen that I've talked about over and over and over again is this huge spike in funding in the middle of or at the beginning of the pandemic. And now we're entering like a new normal where digital health funding this year probably won't even surpass digital health funding in 2020. So over the past couple of years, billions of dollars has been flooding into digital health. Thousands of new digital health companies have launched, and purchasers who've got on board early in the pandemic are now like reconsidering contracts they made with digital health companies and really asking themselves, like, was this the best return on investment, right? Like, was this company I got for my employees, did it really improve their clinical outcomes? Did it reduce my own healthcare costs? And Rock Health actually did a study last year where they analyzed, or they assigned like a clinical robustness score to digital health companies, basically the sum total of the number of clinical trials and regulatory filings that a digital health technology has. And they found that like 60% of the 200 plus digital health technologies analyzed had less than a score of 1. So not many digital health companies or technologies are like backed by evidence, right? And for the longest time, the question has been like, how can we actually like evaluate digital health companies or technology? Like, how is there a framework we can use? Is someone like going to be like the sole evaluator to help purchasers make better decisions and to help digital health builders guide their like building process on what they should be looking for and doing? So then the Peterson Health Technology Institute launched, I think officially in July. So Lindsay, how about you tell us what the Peterson, or who the Peterson Health Technology Institute is?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jared. So basically enter PHTI, right? So the Peterson Health Technology Institute is an independent nonprofit organization focused on exactly what Jared is just describing. So we're going to be focusing on evaluating innovative technologies that are focused on improving health, and we're also going to be looking at whether or not they're lowering costs as well. And really, our broader mission here is to raise the bar for purchasers and the digital health technologies that they're going to be offering to their patients and to the patients across the entire country. So we're really excited about what we're building. And, as one of the most important distinctions I like to say about PHTI is that we are fully independent and fully funded by the Peterson Center on Healthcare. So we are really just focusing on providing this as an offering for the system at large. We're going to be posting our valuations on the website for everybody to be able to read, and nobody will be paying us for us to assess them or evaluate them. And nobody will have to pay us to read the reports that we'll be putting out. So more on that to come throughout the rest of the conversation, but I like to just really tee that up because this is not a sales pitch or anything like that. It's really, we've recognized the problem or gaps in the market, I should say, and we're really trying to close them and provide information to the people who need it.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm so excited about Peterson Health Technology Institute is because in January or February, I wrote an article titled "Are Digital Health Solutions Actually Solutions?" where I really, took a deep dive into the evidence that, or the lack of evidence, digital health companies provide, but at the same time, purchasers are making these decisions. And that's when Lindsay reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's chat." But little did I know, she was working on, or she would be working on the Peterson Health Technology Institute. So I think it's only fitting to keep shedding light on the Peterson Health Technology Institute. And the last time we chatted, I shared this timeline. So we chatted in August, and then in September, the framework was to be released, an assessment roadmap, and then topic areas for evaluation. So all that has been done. We're sticking to the timeline, and now we're here. So now, getting into the framework, I guess before we dive in, how was it created? What's the origin story?
Yeah, so just taking a step back, right? Like you mentioned, and we really talked about last time, there are a number of evaluation frameworks that are used both for digital health companies, but also for drugs and devices, right? And so the first thing that we said was, we need a unique framework that is going to be focused on digital health technologies specifically. Because the way that they're purchased and the reasons that they are purchased is different. And so the information that people need is unique. And so we started off by partnering with ICER, which is a known organization that does evaluations of drugs. But we said to them, we want to take your framework and adjust it to meet the needs of digital health technologies. And so we worked with them over the better part of a year to really develop a framework that answers three main questions, right? What is the technology, right? You'll see that in a minute. We'll start with also known as the technology context, right? Then we ask, does the technology work? Is it clinically and effective, and is it safe? And then, is it worth it, right? Because you need the answers to all three of those questions in order to make an informed decision. And so that's really where we started from, and then we broke it down from there.
Right, and it seems so simple, yet no one's thought to actually put it all together and take the first step. So let's get into it. So the first question, what is the digital health technology? I guess dive into what is this technology context? What are we taking into consideration?
Yeah. So I'll just say that I'm coming off of a high. I just came back. So we've been engaging with we have a purchaser advisory council that we put together, and we actually just came back from a site visit with one of the participants of the council. And so we went and talked to them really to hear their insights about what is most important for us to include in our reports for you, right? Like getting even further granular information from them is really the point of us going to talk to them. And one of the really interesting takeaways from that is their desire to really have just upfront information about what is the technology we're talking about, and are there others that are similar to it, and what are the differences, right? That's like the first question, understanding the competitive landscape. And then there's other questions, like they're interested in understanding the regulatory landscape, and if there's reimbursements, or if some of these technologies need to get any FDA approvals or clearance, because these technologies often fall sort of in a gray area, and having that information provided to them would be helpful. And then, a third consideration is if they're going to be bringing these technologies into their companies and into asking providers to implement them into their work streams, they want to make sure that the digital health technology companies, are around in a year. And so they want information about their funders, the funding. I think a lot of these concerns we've heard, especially since pair therapeutics and what happened there, and just with the general market, there's a little bit more of a sensitivity. And so they really want to understand more about the funding landscape as well. And then, last but not least, they're really interested in the privacy and security components here. Does this integrate into my EMR? Or, do they have the high trust certifications or the NIST certifications? And are they HIPAA compliant? And so there's a lot of questions that these decision makers, just related to the technology before they're getting into the clinical and economic components, are asking. And so we thought it was an important place to just start off by providing that information.
Yeah. When I was like reading step one is like, what is the context? I was kind of thinking about like how I'm evaluated in residency, where I'm just evaluated as a first year resident, but could be much different than someone who's been there for 3 years already, right? And it's like context is everything. A digital health company that's a unicorn, can't be evaluated the same or needs different context than a company that just raised 50 million, right? Because companies with more money, they have the cash to run trials or run studies to basically show or prove their clinical effectiveness or lack thereof. All right, then next, I think the most important question for me is like, does it work? And if so, for whom? The clinical safety and effectiveness. And, going back to the Rock Health study, which showed that like 60% of digital health companies studied had a clinical robustness score of 1 or less. Like, where's the clinical safety and effectiveness there? Then we have user experience and health equity.
Yep, exactly. And one key thing that we're looking at here is basically, we're thinking about it like this, right? If a technology is entering into a clinical workflow, or if patients are using the technology, we want to make sure that it is additive, right? It should be as good or better than standard care. And if not, then there's questions about the value that adds to them and to the purchasers who are making that decision themselves.
Right. And I was like reading through like the details of the clinical effectiveness. And I was like reading like there's like a minimal standard, but it's gonna be different for each, like for the type of digital health technology. So like I have a Whoop on. So this is just tracking my heart rate. This is just tracking like my steps, right? And at a minimum, it should have evidence that it can track my steps accurately, it can track my heart rate accurately, versus like a digital health company that's provides weight loss solutions, which we're seeing a ton of. That could be a whole nother virtual event. But if you're providing like behavioral health therapy for weight loss and like semaglutide or Ozempic, like you should have some sort of like observational study, controlled study, quasi experimental study, whatever you name it, but something against a control group to show that your digital health solution is better than like the standard of care, or like not using your behavioral health solution, which probably no one's done yet.
It all takes time.
Exactly. And can you provide like more insight into like the user experience? Because I feel like that kind of goes like overlooked. Like how's the user feel like using the app? Like can they use it? Is it like difficult to use? Like
Yeah, so I mean that's a great question. So actually when we were at the health conference, for those that don't know, HLTH, we actually did a patient panel or patient roundtable, and we were talking to different patients that use different technologies, and it was really eye-opening to hear from them what matters, right? And there, if a person who is using technology as part of their care pathway is not going to use the technology because they can't figure it out, or the app is really slow, or it's not in a language that they
yeah,
understand, it's not going to be generating the outcomes that the app intends, right? And so it's important for people to be able to use the technology in the way that it is meant to be used.
right,
Otherwise, they're going to download something different or buy something different and try that out. And
right.
we heard that time and time again. So it was really interesting hearing, oh, version 7 was great on my phone, but then they updated it and version 8 didn't work on my phone. And so I tried something different.
No, for
So,
sure.
really taking those conversations and perspectives back to what we're working on has been really helpful.
Right. And then like within what you just mentioned is like the health equity standpoint, right? Like if it's not in the language that you speak, then why would you use the app? Or I'm not sure if it was in the article that I read about the framework, but like if you have an app, that for the people with like deafness, like it needs to be like well read, like well understandable. You shouldn't have sounds, right? Like that's not needed.
Yeah.
Um, so very interesting. And then in regards to like the grading of the clinical effectiveness, I saw like we're using, or we, now I'm like jumping into PHTI, using like the ICER
Yeah.
grid, or so can you explain more about that? Because this is actually what the United States Preventative Task Force uses for
Yeah.
their own like recommendations for like getting the flu vaccine, getting mammograms.
Yes. USPSTF is also just the US preventative test. Yeah. I just happen to like saying the acronym. So any chance I get, I will use it. But so this was created by ICER, and the reason that we incorporated it into our framework is just the reality is that evidence comes in a lot of different flavors, and we need to try to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to try to bucket it in terms of quality, because evidence is not all equally good, right? And so we need to make sure we're taking a close look at all of the evidence that we're looking at, to make sure that, it meets a certain standard or threshold, to
And I
make
love,
sure as we're incorporating it into our analysis.
right. And honestly, like the grading system is just makes sense. I mean, if anyone in here lives in New York City, at the outside of every restaurant, there's like an A, B, or C based off like the cleanliness of the restaurant. So I'm happy that like this is being integrated, measuring the comparative net health benefit with like the certainty of this evidence coming from like the medicine standpoint. It just like makes sense. And again, like why hasn't this been done before? And so like with the context, with the clinical safety and effectiveness, now we move into like, is it worth it? Which was kind of like my key question when I first wrote the article back in February. Is like, are digital health solutions actually solutions? Should employers or hospitals, like, should we be buying into these digital health companies? So how we considering the economic impact?
Yeah, It's a great question, and one we've spent a tremendous amount of time on, because this is actually really a differentiating factor for us as we created our framework.
Mm.
So, as we've developed this, we really thought about what information do the people who are making these decisions need to know, right? And so looking at whether or not it's worth it, you have to think about who's asking that question, right? And so purchasers, and when I say purchasers, I really mean like payers, providers, or large self-insured employers. They all have annual budgets that they're thinking about, right? And then patients also are not interested in purchasing something now that's going to help them in 20 years, or they're not going to see value from it, right? So they're really thinking more short term, which is why we decided on doing the budget impact analysis, because that really allows us to say, what are the ways that this is impacting you now compared to standard care?
Right. It's like the different like time horizons.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Are you
So,
gonna have like a longer horizon as well, or just we're thinking like 1-2 years?
so I think what we're doing is it 1 year and then 2 to 5 years, and
Okay.
then, but it's really going to be about the evidence that we're able to get from the companies. And so while that might be ideal, right, the framework in reality is just the backbone of what we would love to be able to do. And it really comes down to the data, which is both exactly the point we're trying to make, right? There needs to be more data
Right.
in order to do these assessments. So we're really excited to dig in to see what we can get for these first few.
Right. All right. Excellent. And then after all this is done, after we answered all these questions, then it comes time for like what's next? What is the recommendations? So how will the recommendations be made? Will it be just as simple as this, like adopt, further testing, do not adopt, or something more detailed?
Yeah, so it looks, I don't know if that's on my computer or, so it will be, again, like I said, depending on the evidence that we're able to get, but the final recommendation will be, we're looking at it at both the clinical category level, and then we'll also be looking at the company level. And so we'll be, depending on the evidence, we'll be saying, we support, based off of the amount of evidence or the quality of the evidence, adoption or further testing, or do not adopt. And with all of those, it would also include some information about, we suggest further testing based off of the current evidence that exists, and here are where some of the gaps are. And so we would be able to make those determinations once we really see what is out there.
No, for sure. And again, going back to like the USPSTF
Yeah.
guidelines, like when they make these recommendations, they say, based off of the evidence, we highly recommend, we like, recommend on a case-by-case basis. So again, it's really cool to actually, now I'm thinking about, like, see the parallels between like guideline recommendations in medicine and basically like clinical effectiveness, like economic impact evaluations or recommendations for digital health technology. And to be honest, if digital health technology is being used as not like a prescription, but maybe one day we'll be able to prescribe digital health technology like they do in Germany, I believe. Like, it's important to assess these digital health technologies as if it's like a vaccine or a medication. And I think this could really like set the bar and like set a new standard where all digital health, eventually, like all digital health companies like will have to pass like the PHTI evaluation, but hopefully it won't be as sinister as that. But like like getting through the steps, and from a purchaser's point of view, like this is great, right? Like you guys are doing something that they have probably wanted and probably wish they had in 2020, where it was just like a frenzy to purchase digital health companies, you name it. And now they're like, well, we lost money on all of it, or it's becoming more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's great.
And I'll also just add one other thing is from the site visit that we just had. It was it was actually really interesting that there were a number of people in the room, and we were asking them about these recommendations and what is most helpful to them.
Mhm.
And they said, do not give us a letter grade, right? Because without the wraparound context, it's not really meaningful.
Oh, that's true.
And so there is a real desire for, while people are looking for a summary rating, you also have to remember that people who are making these decisions are balancing a lot internally and have their own internal, um, you know, reasons that they're making different decisions. So um, there's a lot more than just a yes, no that they're looking for.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. The letter grade context is important, which is why it's step number one.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, great. So now moving into like some FAQs, and I know Maria Thomas asked like the first question we were going to ask, which is like, what are the initial topic areas for evaluation? I know this is what I've been waiting for since you guys announced your launch back in July.
Yeah, so we just announced these and it's hot off the press. So we're really excited to be able to share. So the first two areas that we'll be looking at are virtual MSK and diabetes remote patient monitoring.
Yeah, and I think I got an email from someone like telling me like, hey, you should write about this, which I already planned on doing. But I guess these areas are important given how costly they are. And like, I mean, diabetes especially, right? Like, I think by 2030, or is it here? Yeah, by 2030, the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, obesity in general, is expected to like double. And there's actually like an obesity startup called 2030 Health, which
Hmm.
is an aptly named because like they want to prevent obesity from hitting this like double mark by or maybe like, yeah, by 2030. So the diabetes remote patient monitoring, I think, is a huge area, costly area. From the clinical perspective, I would say like every other patient I see has type 2 diabetes. Many patients are coming to the hospital with like uncontrolled type 2 diabetes that would be better controlled if there were robust remote patient monitoring programs, which there are. But the question is like, are they good or are they worth it?
Yeah.
And then I guess virtually enabled MSK care, who everyone and their mother or everyone and their father too has back pain. So I can definitely see how this is a huge area. And so how did you decide this versus that?
Yeah.
Is it on what I just said? Like,
So yes, and right, we had to create obviously a little bit of more of a framework,
mhm,
right? Because we're really trying to um be really thoughtful about how we're approaching this. And so we kind of laid out three main ways that we were bucketing the technologies. So we were looking at areas that were driving significant spend. And that's pretty easy to find. And it's really not the ones that like you said, none of it would be surprising.
right.
But then we started to look a step further and see which areas were really experiencing rapid growth. And that can be signaled by a lot of companies in an area, or a lot of investments in a short amount of time,
Mhm,
and a variety of other factors on top of that. And then we're really looking at areas in order to produce meaningful assessments that allow decision makers to make decisions. There has to be sufficient evidence. And so we needed we needed an area that had enough companies that would be mature enough in the market to have enough evidence for us to really take a look at and have real clinical outcomes
Oh.
and economic outcomes for us to include in our assessments.
Right. Yeah. So it makes sense going after diabetes, which is everywhere, and more companies. I've written about all this, like especially with the in the obesity space, we're just seeing a proliferation of weight management startups, right? Which all has to do with type 2 diabetes as well.
Right.
And moving on to the next question, which someone asked, so we knew would be asked, is can companies ask to be evaluated?
So Jared and I were just talking about this earlier. So companies, we've actually reached out to companies who we intend to evaluate. But we also recognize that there may be companies out there that we might not be aware of. And so we do welcome, taking a look at the information that we've provided on the website and to reach out to us if you feel like you meet the criteria, and that if you want to have a conversation about that.
Right. And then I guess when it comes time, I keep saying I swear I'm going to drop out of residency and join PHTI. When you do select a company, like what you have already, that's to be released early next year, I guess. But how will you get the data, right? Because like I just talked about how like there's not enough data, which is the
Yeah,
problem. So like where are we gathering data from?
it's a great question, and one that I've been really steeped in for the past few weeks, months. So the data for the reports will be both they will be both public data as well as company provided data. And so we're really doing a full literature review, full like SLR, that we will take a look at all of the publicly available data and published data. And then we've reached out to companies and actually requested specific data elements from them. And so as part of our, we wanted to let them know that we'll be doing these assessments. And then we're asking them basically, we'll be including you in our assessments. And do you have data that you would like to share with us that would be helpful to us as we're making these assessments? But being mindful of the fact that data coming from companies needs to still meet the same thresholds that we're holding the publicly available data to.
Right. And I do wonder if like, once PHI gains momentum, if like other companies will be like, oh, they're asking for like data, like should we actually like preemptively start doing stuff, preemptively start gathering data, and even doing like in silico, is that the correct word, like trials where we have all this patient data, clinical data, and we could just do our own like analysis and have that ready to go. And something else I was thinking, not FAQ, but I guess your evaluations will also be good for investors, like for them to make sound investments, right? I don't think maybe you mentioned that, but that's something that just popped into my head.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the broader point earlier of people, there's a desire for more information.
Right.
And, as the like investment market right now it's changing, but digital health is always going to be interesting, and healthcare is always of interest to investors. And so I think that there's going to always be a desire for more data. I think that will only be helpful for them in their investment decisions.
For sure. And Gabby now just asking a question, asking like in regards to like updating the framework, right? Like will it be iterated on based off of feedback, or are these just like the fundamentals and like you'll build on top of it?
We are already planning for
version 2.
Well, let me
Okay.
say that we are planning that in the future it will need to be updated, just because anything does, right?
Right.
The ICER framework came out 10 years ago, and if we were using that one, it just, everything over time, as more and more information and more companies have more data, then we would be able to do more with it. And so we speak to that, Gabby. I can a bit more in our assessment framework brief. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. So you can take a look there and see what we've said there. But yes, we do plan to have a 2.0 at some point.
Nice. And then last question, probably the most like interesting one, like how will PHTI like engage its stakeholders?
Yeah, there's just, to be brief, there's a bit of that on our website, but like I've mentioned today, we have a purchaser advisory council that we're meeting with frequently. We're also doing site visits with them. We're engaging with patients. We're hosting roundtables with patients. We're having a clinical expert. We're making sure that we're working with clinicians and getting their perspective on these diseases as we work through the data. So we're engaging experts there. And we're also, there's a fourth category that I am missing, but we are doing a lot of engagement. And actually, we just brought on, I'll put a plug for Meg Barron, who just joined as a managing director of stakeholder engagement.
Oh, nice.
She's joining from the AMA. She's terrific, and she's terrific. Just joined a few weeks ago, and we're really excited about her and all of the ways that we're going to continue to engage the community as we really build the excitement for what we're doing here.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So, Lindsay, thank you for joining me. Just to summarize real quick for everyone. So PHTI, they're the first ones to like step forward and be like, you know what, we'll be the ones to independently evaluate digital health companies because no one's done it before and it's very well needed. And so I believe the first round of reports will be next year.
Q1 2024. So we're going to keep pushing. We're busy.
All right. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. If you have any other questions, you could email me. I'm happy to answer them. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much, Jared.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.